In the midst of all the warmongering and the threats of genocide against Iran and all the civilian casualties that have already happened, and now threats by the Pentagon made towards the Pope, and now there's a ceasefire, which is all dominating the news cycle, and for very good reason. It should be. I do want to make sure we're aware and are not overlooking some of the less bombastic horrors that are being committed by our current government. Because while all of this was already happening, the Trump regime has recently condemned multiple species to extinction directly, and also effectively made the decision to dismantle the entire U.S. Forest Service. Using the Iran war and the whole Strait of Hormuz situation, which is now kind of a moot point, as an excuse, the administration gave the oil and gas industry special permission to ignore the Endangered Species Protection Act in the Gulf of Mexico when performing their oil extraction activities. The Gulf, as you may know, is home to multiple critically endangered species that have been more or less saved by these sorts of protection acts, including one called the Rice's whale, of which there are only about 50 or so left, and according to a lot of predictions, even losing one breeding age female could spell the end of the species. And also, the war in Iran puts multiple species directly in danger by being just straight up in the line of fire. There are multiple critically endangered species in the region that have thrived in these mostly empty, barred off from the public, mainly military installation areas that are now under fire, that are now the target of bombardment. And of course, the really big one that affects you directly if you live in the United States is the dismantling of the U.S. Forest Service. The Trump administration has done a similar thing they did when they wanted to neuter the Bureau of Land Management, is they moved the main headquarters, or are in the process of moving the main headquarters, from Washington, D.C. to Utah. And when you do these big sudden moves, what happens invariably is you lose a huge portion of your staff, especially your senior staff, and you gut a lot of the experience and capability and just straight up manpower of the agency. Right now, placed at the head of the U.S. Forest Service is Tom Schultz, a logging executive from Idaho. You can see where those sorts of conflicts of interest might lie. The plan right now is to close all 10 regional offices belonging to the U.S. Forest Service, as well as closing 50 plus of the U.S. Forest Service research stations to consolidate them to one location. Consolidate, because really the idea is just to get rid of them, because when you have research stations and you're doing ecological research and such, you can't really just pick up and take your research with you. It's all locale specific. I mean, this is how to gut a government agency without just flat out disbanding it 101 here. Not even to mention all of the other restrictions lifted, restrictions and regulations lifted off of the fossil fuel industry, all of the various ecological initiatives that have already been abandoned, both in this term and the previous terms of this administration, the complete abandonment of green energy initiatives. All of this, much like what they've already been doing to the Bureau of Land Management, is a deliberate effort to neuter and delegitimize the effectiveness of a public agency that protects our public lands, and then use that loss of effectivity to manufacture consent to privatize our public lands for profit. Much like they also want to do, and have for a long time wanted to do, with the National Park Service. I'd also like to mention here that the U.S. Forest Service engages in a lot of wildfire management and prevention efforts across the nation, so this is primed to be a brutal fire season with much more than average loss of life and property. But to wrap this up, the deliberate destruction of a species for profit has to be one of the most wicked crimes it is possible to commit. You know, coming in under, crimes against humans, right? And more than that, the knowing abuse and wholesale destruction of our ecosystems and our entire planet for profit must be the single greatest crime it is possible to commit. I mean, that's something that puts the entire future of the human species and every single living thing on this planet at stake. It's just every time that, on top of the already very public, very much in the public conscience, wretched acts of cruelty and wanton destruction and dismantling of all of our public institutions for the sake of profit, there's always just even more going underneath, even more to add to the list of reasons that this regime, that this entire administration needs to be removed as soon as possible. And invoking the 25th is not enough, right? That's his own cabinet dispelling him, and then the cabinet and the vice president and that whole apparatus remains, right? I mean, that simply isn't good enough. You're getting rid of the figurehead and leaving the handlers, right? If you only do that, you still have the same little group of psychopathic greed monsters running the government. So it really does need to be the whole executive branch that has to be R&R'd.